Hey guys, Nolar here, back on 5.9 Direct, and today I'm here to talk about Diablo 4. You saw me on the last video about a month ago, or 2 months ago at this point, when we did the open beta for D4. The game's been out for about a month at this point, and the preseason it's been the preseason for a bit, and season 1's about to start in a few days here. So I just want to talk about how everyone's feeling about the game and what it looks like going into season 1. And I wanted to look at it. It's been successful straight through and through. They've made history company sales for Diablo 4, fastest PC selling game. But the honeymoon's over and people are starting to see the cracks. And someone here, Mr. Actman, enjoy his content. You can find his video in the description below here, this original one. And I'm not going to go through it and react to the whole thing, but I've already watched it and I want to talk about the points that he made that I think I disagree with, I agree with, and kind of in the middle. He's right and wrong. So let's get into it, okay? First off, Actman did this video here talking about Diablo 4 is a bad video game, in his opinion. And he's kind of right, kind of wrong. So his major point here, and I need to scrub through, his issue was difficulty. And he's talking about level scaling. And the issue with level scaling in this game is level scaling is a problem, but there are minimum item levels or minimum levels you have to hit to get to zones, otherwise you'll die. Which is very similar to D2, D3, D1, like it's all like every RPG. The reason why they did the level scaling here, which I appreciate, is that my buddy who's level 50 can still play with me at level 20, you know what I mean? Or vice versa. So there's that, and the couch co-op experience is pretty good. But I think the biggest reason he feels like the level scaling sucks is that once you over level a zone, and you do that pretty quick, which is why he didn't notice this, everything comes to your level. So if you're level 15 and you're in a level 5 zone, well, everything's gonna be level 15, so the challenge is the same. And it sucks. It absolutely sucks.
It's funny because every quest has a level recommendation next to it, yet it's always the same as your level. So it's like, what's the point?
He's right about this point. You don't feel powerful as you get higher up in level. Actually, you get weaker because the enemies get stronger in both damage, HP, and all that stuff, but only your skill point goes up, and maybe you get a piece of gear, most likely you don't, which is why, for the most part, as you level up, you actually get weaker compared to everybody else. Until you hit those breakpoints of World Tier 3 at level 50, World Tier 4 at level 70, 73, something like that. That's why it sucks, you know? But I think his experience, and just to be clear, he's looking at this game as a campaign RPG enjoyer. He never got beyond level 48 or 50 to get to World Tier 3. So he straight up did the campaign and then stopped. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning that and like making sure that's a sticking point is that if he got to the end game, a lot of the stuff he had grievances for would be wrong. Like he would be, oh yeah, that's a good idea, or that works out better. Some stuff would be a little more elucidated as pretty bad, but I think he didn't get the full picture. And to be fair, I'm gonna stop this here. It feels like he's just your casual video game enjoyer. Like, it's very clear he's played a lot of video games, RPGs. He made that abundantly clear, but I don't think he's an ARPG fan or veteran. And because the reason I say that is it's very clear, like season restarts, all this other stuff, which has been a staple in ARPGs, he's not a fan of. And that's totally fair if you were a casual enjoyer and coming through it for the first time. But if you know what you're signing up for, you would understand that, yeah, I have to get to the end game. Like an MMO and other action RPGs, like I have to get to the end game in order to really see the potential of the game, right? So his fatal flaw with the difficulty, again, he outscaled some of those things. Like he did the campaign and did some side level campaign stuff, some strongholds, some dungeons, and out leveled the area, because if you just zoom through the campaign, you will be under leveled at the end to fight Lilith. So he was level 46, which is over leveled. You're supposed to be 40, the recommended is 42. If you just zoomed through the campaign, only did the campaign, didn't touch anything else, you would have been like 38, 39, right? So he's complaining about the lack of challenge And that's what I feel is he outscaled it and didn't see it fast enough, or didn't see it early enough. And he outscaled it so fast that everything was appropriately his level, like scaled to him. The next thing that he talks about is the open world and how the scaling kind of screws with it, because when you have segmented sections like level 1 to 17 is here, and then, or 5 to 17 is here, and then 18 to 24 is over here, and 20, you know, your mind associates those levels with the area. And because it's an open world, that's kind of how a lot of open world RPGs operate, where they have an open world and some levels you just don't go into till you get there, right? Or if you want a challenge, you get there early and then you try your might and see if you can beat it. But for him, because everything's scaled to him, none of the open world feels memorable in that story aspect or the leveling aspect. And I think that's a fair criticism, because again, he's looking at it from a story-driven single-player RPG kind of lens. Yeah, he's right. Hellblazer doesn't look any different than, you know, the Dry Steppes, you know, in terms of like how I remember it. Of course, visually, Dry Steppes is, you know, desert-like, and Hellblazer's the bloody, woody area. But like, yeah, he's right, totally right about that. However, from that lens, outside of that lens, I don't know. Okay, the next thing he's talking about is the dark tone, and I think this is where he's at odds with action RPGs as a genre, because these days action RPGs, they want to be gods among mortals. So you're a god, you're gonna cut through 1,000, you know, trash mobs, and then you fight the boss, which you're going to, you know, click 3-4 buttons and then they're gonna die, right? That's the power fantasy of an action RPG enjoyer these days, and he wants to equate the story of the dark tone with that. And with the dark tone, you want the sense of dread, you want the sense of danger at every corner. But if you're killing thousands of nameless trash mobs, that's kind of at odds with it. So from that perspective, I get it, but that's where I think he just doesn't like action RPGs, today's current setup of action RPGs. He talks a lot about Diablo 1, but to be fair, Diablo 1, even though it's an action RPG, it's kind of a horror survival game too, when you like really break it down. So it's not necessarily the same. But anyways, this point here that he talks about where the tone is different, the dark tone doesn't make any sense, doesn't provide any challenge. Okay, that's fair. Now, the biggest thing he talks about is skills.
And every time I leveled up, I was super pumped to spend the next 5 minutes looking at the skill tree and carefully considering what I would put my point in. I felt like my playstyle was constantly expanding until I unlocked my ultimate. Once you do that, the game becomes extremely repetitive, as your playstyle is set in stone from then on, and you're only investing points in passive bonuses and stat increases.
And here's where I agree with him here, but I also disagree. I agree with him in the sense that the skills, you only get 6 skills. You get a basic plus 5 other ones. Again, you can change the basic if the build doesn't need a basic for resource generation or whatever. He's right about that. 6 skills sucks. I wish you had more, because D2 had 12. But the only thing is, it's kind of like you think you want it, but you don't. Because having multiple skills available to be swapped around, it sucks, because then you have lots of cooldowns. You know, just a lot of juggling around to work with. So because the biggest thing is he equated the game to World of Warcraft, right? He was saying he had more fun with multiple skills than he did with 5. Now here's the thing. In World of Warcraft, skills are on a 2-minute, 3-minute, 5-minute cooldown. So you can rotate stuff all around, and it's a casting skills and all this kind of stuff. Very different than an action RPG, where in D4, your ultimate's on like a 1-minute cooldown, 170-second cooldown, and then your other skills are like 5 seconds, 10 seconds, or if you have any resource you can like burn. It's different. I know he says they're not the same, but it's like very clearly apples and oranges. The last thing I want to talk about, or the next thing I want to talk about, cameras. All right, camera sucks. He's absolutely right. You compare it to D1, D2, D3, the cameras are zoomed out there, but in D4, they're so zoomed in. It kind of sucks, man. So he's absolutely right about that. There's nothing to say. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is side content. Now, in the game, there's Renown. Renown is a system where everything you do gives you Renown, and the Renown gives you skill points, max potion capacity, obol max capacity, and then of course the very end gives you Paragon, which is great for your Paragon board. Now, it gives you a reason to do things, but the checklist is so long, it feels like a checklist, like you're just doing chores. You don't want to do them, you have to do them because the rewards are so good that you gotta do it. Right there, it's chores. Now, here's the problem. This is where this philosophy is cool, you doing it one time, but when the concept of ARPGs and resetting your character or making a new character for new seasons, the reason why it sucks is because you don't want to regrind that stuff again. And I understand people don't want to do Renown again, and they made a middle ground like compromise of your Lilith statues as well as your exploration Renown kind of carries over, so there's less grinding you got to do. Like, fair, I guess, but it'd be nice to just not do that extra grind again. However, counterpoint, the reason why I say they're keeping it in is because if you didn't have the Renown grind, what do you have to do in this new season? Grind from level 1 to 100, that's it. There's nothing else you have. So I understand keeping some of the Renown grind lets you stay logged in and continue to play, but it's not great if I gotta do it again. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm on both. I understand it. Doesn't mean I like it, but I get it. The next thing you want to talk about is loot. Now, loot. Whew. I have so many thoughts on loot that as a whole, loot is pretty trash. I'll say that. Itemization in the loot is pretty awful. Right now, this point he's about to make is like the way it looks on the item inventory screen. Okay, fair. It all looks the same. The uniques have a little bit of, unique effect, but other than that, they don't look crazy, like different, and compared to D1 and D2, so that's fair. More importantly, he's saying like they're all the same size, so they're all the same like value, and it feels weird because coming from like Path of Exile or Diablo 3, where like certain things like a shield would take up 6 blocks while a sword takes up only like 4 or 3 or whatever, it actually kind of feels like, Tetris puzzling. It feels good, actually. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's weird. I initially was like, oh sweet, I can have so much item, but then the items are pretty trash, so I don't really care. So everything just, like he says, feels like a blur. They're all the same. He's right. Now, the other thing too that sucks is like the actual itemization, like damage to close enemies, damage to distant enemies, damage to stunned enemies, all this stuff, garbage. Multipliers upon multipliers that don't make any sense. And the stats feel meaningless because like, yeah, 450, like 9 stats in the beginning sucks because again, he did this as a campaign enjoyer versus at the end when you're getting like 200 plus. Okay, yeah, that's a little more meaningful and means something. So loot sucks. I agree with him there. And even like, if you're talking about Necro, Barb, Druid, all like specific classes and the uniques and the way they build, it is pretty bad. There's only like one class, I think it's Druids, that uniques actually mean something and like define their build and are good enough to like make you want to keep grinding it. Everything else doesn't matter. They don't care. All right, moving on. Gold is worthless. Okay, here's the thing. Again, story level, you don't get a lot of gold, and as everything levels with you, that includes the vendors. So I understand his perspective of like, oh, I haven't upgraded my weapon from level 7 and I'm level 15, so I should get a level 15 weapon. But you can't really buy a good level 15 weapon because it's so expensive. His point there, meaning gold is worthless, very true. It should be worth like, they drop a 0 off of the end, like a digit off the end, and maybe it's worth it. But in the end game, when you are re-rolling stats, when you are re-speccing, it's millions of gold. It's worth a lot. Therefore, it's a good gold sink. There are a lot of good gold sinks at the end game that he didn't get to experience because he never got to the end game. He stopped at level 50. And so to me, this point makes sense, again, from the leveling perspective as a campaign enjoyer, but absolutely not as a end game enjoyer, His next point is the story. And all right, let's talk about the story here. ARPGs are not known for having good stories. Statement. That statement alone doesn't mean we shouldn't have good stories, but the expectation there is if the story is passable, it's fine. Because the main draw of an ARPG is getting strong in the combat and killing monsters very quickly. So story is always a second afterthought, you know, secondary. And here the story was like a solid 7 out of 10. The good premise setup, some poor execution in the middle, ending's decent. You know, like it's overall okay. Like it's probably the best presented ARPG story I've seen. May not necessarily be the best story I've ever seen from an ARPG. So overall, like that's his critique. Again, he's critiquing it as a single RPG story experience, like FF16 or Dead Space or something along those lines. And this is where he's at odds with, or I'm at odds with it, because it shouldn't be compared that way. Because over there, the draw is the story, right? Like the combat's great and the gameplay is great, but you're there for the story. But here it feels like, at least in my opinion, and a lot of ARPG enjoyers, it's the other way around. The story is secondary. And so his complaint about the story not really living up to it, like I get it if you were talking about it like you're looking at this game FF16. Nope, not so much great. No, not so much. So I understand his point that like D1 had good setup to story, but here's the thing. D1 was a buy it once back in the day, and that was it. You paid your 40, 50 bucks, got to experience the game. Yeah, so it was presented like itself like as a single player RPG. Here, the game is an ARPG with a live service element attached to it, meaning the games are going to get better from here on out. From this point on, the game will only have better quality of life updates, you know, more content to enjoy. It only gets better. So to my perspective, like comparing it to D1 and D2 is kind of unfair, even though it's the same concept of the franchise and all that stuff. It's not the same game, and shouldn't be. It's apples to oranges again. So yeah, overall, I feel like the story is, you know, as its own standalone. It had some setup, but it didn't execute very well a lot. Like here are his critique of the Tree of Whispers. Cool, goddamn tree. Like it's such a cool thought. They didn't set it up right, you know? And then you just do it as dailies, and you know, it is what it is. But yeah, so story perspective, like I understand what he's saying. From his perspective, he's not wrong. Another thing he said from the way he's looking at it, which is a campaign, single player driven story enjoyer, he's not wrong about this at all. But from an ARPG veteran or people who enjoy that kind of gameplay and understand what it has, we can push back on him and understand like he doesn't get it. He didn't get to the end game. He doesn't like it. He doesn't get to the end game. He doesn't understand the quirks or what he thinks are bad things are actually good things, you know, vice versa. So those are some of the things. Now, he's not the only person to really talk about D4 in a terrible way. There are like Rax, I think Woody Joe, Kriparian, all these other content creators who are doing D4. They talked about, you know, their grievances with D4 as an ARPG as a whole, which are right. Like Crip was the one that told us that like, hey, resistances don't even work in the game. And we're like, what? Like, how does this make any sense? So like from that perspective, like those guys got that down pat, but like from I hate to call him a casual, but like it's very clear, like he only picked up the game, put 30 hours in and put it down. And to me, for any MMO or ARPG player, that's a casual player, you know? His grievances are absolutely right for a casual player. Nothing wrong with it. Can they be fixed? They should. Some stuff should be fixed, but some of his grievances, like I said, gold being worthless, doesn't make any sense at the end game, because gold is absolutely like valuable at the end game. Where if I would told you just grind like nightmare dungeons, pick up all the ancestral gear and then sell it straight up, don't even break it down for resources, you straight up sell it because you want the gold. That tells you that like, okay, that's an end game activity he never got to experience, so that opinion isn't invalid, but like that's just how he sees it. So anyways, I rambled on long enough talking about Ackman's video. I think it's a pretty good video. He put it's a 42-minute video, tons of editing, well scripted. Again, nothing wrong with his video. I just had to push back on it from someone who's seen the end game and can kind of talk about some of his points. Season 1's coming up, this Malignant Hearts. I'm not too excited. Like, I'm not terribly excited. I'm excited because it's the first season and they got my money for season pass, but I'm not like terribly excited because it's basically legendary gems for D3. and I've already had enough of that. But we'll see how many legendary effects those have, and you know, the gameplay loop and all that stuff is coming up. And I'll probably make a video on a bit of a guide on what you want to do, you know, what's the easiest way, all that kind of stuff. I'll probably make one of those when the season drops and I can record some footage. But overall, I'm going to be playing a Necro again, probably just Bone Spear, no minions, even though I love minions. The minion playstyle, unless the Malignant Hearts give it a big boost, I'll probably just be playing Bone Spear or something along those lines. Sork, depending on the Malignant Hearts, maybe I'll play a Sork too, maybe not, because losing all that armor, 750 armor and gems for Malignant Hearts, we'll see what it plays out to it. So anyways, guys, this is Nolar. I've been rambling and talking about D4. I love action RPGs and MMOs, so if you want to find more of that content here, let me know. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. All the other guys at Direct, they love, you know, other things, Destiny, single player driven RPGs, all that kind of stuff too. Let us know what you guys want to see. Appreciate you all being here, and I'll catch you in the next one. Nolar out.